Living in Pine Ridge Gardens seemed like a dream when I first moved in 3 years ago. The houses were well maintained, the lawns perfectly manicured, and the HOA seemed reasonable enough. That was before I met Karen Henderson, our self-appointed neighborhood watch commander and HOA president who treated every minor infraction like a federal crime. Karen was the type of person who measured grass height with a ruler and kept a detailed spreadsheet of every resident's supposed violations. She had shoulder-length blonde hair that she kept in a perpetual bob, always wore pantsuits even for casual HOA meetings, and had mastered the art of the condescending smile. Her weapon of choice was a thick binder filled with HOA regulations that she quoted like scripture. My first encounter with Karen happened during my second month in Pine Ridge Gardens. I had installed a small bird feeder in my backyard, thinking it would be a nice addition to my morning coffee routine. Within 24 hours, Karen was at my door, binder in hand, pointing to subsection 12-A of the HOA covenants. The HOA covenants clearly state that any outdoor installations must be approved by the Architectural Review Committee, she announced, tapping the page with her manicured finger. Your bird feeder is an unauthorized structure that must be removed immediately. I explained that it was a simple hanging feeder, barely visible from the street, but Karen was unmoved. She handed me a violation notice and informed me that I had 72 hours to comply or face a $50 fine. That's when I realized I was dealing with someone who thrived on petty power. Over the next few months, Karen found increasingly creative ways to make my life difficult. She cited me for leaving my garbage cans out 20 minutes past the designated pickup time. She complained that my outdoor light fixture was 3 inches too low according to the residential lighting standards. She even tried to fine me for parking my car in my own driveway overnight, claiming it violated the aesthetic guidelines. Each time, I followed the proper appeals process, attended the monthly HOA meetings, and calmly presented my case. The other board members, clearly intimidated by Karen's aggressive tactics, usually sided with her despite the obvious overreach. But I kept detailed records of every interaction, every violation notice, and every questionable decision. The real trouble started when I decided to install a privacy fence around my backyard. I had done my homework, submitted the proper architectural review forms, and received written approval from the committee. The fence was regulation height, made from approved materials, and professionally installed. Everything was completely by the book. Karen, however, had other plans. She showed up at my door the day after installation, practically vibrating with indignation. "This fence is completely inappropriate for our neighborhood," she declared, waving her hands dramatically. "It creates an unsightly barrier that disrupts the open, welcoming aesthetic of Pine Ridge Gardens." I politely reminded her that I had followed all the proper procedures and received official approval. I even showed her the signed documentation. Karen's face turned an impressive shade of red as she realized she had no legitimate grounds for complaint. "We'll see about that," she muttered, spinning on her heel and marching back to her house 3 doors down. Within a week, I received a new violation notice claiming that my fence exceeded the height restrictions by 2 inches. I measured it myself and found it to be exactly 6 feet tall, precisely what the regulations specified. When I challenged the citation, Karen produced her own measurements showing 6 feet and 2 inches. The dispute escalated to a formal hearing where Karen presented photographs and official measurements taken by what she claimed was a certified surveyor. I countered with my own documentation, including a video of the installation process that clearly showed the fence meeting all requirements. The hearing became a spectacle as Karen grew increasingly agitated when her evidence was questioned. She accused me of bribing the installer, tampering with the fence after installation, and even suggested that I had somehow manipulated the measuring devices. The other board members looked uncomfortable as Karen's claims became more outlandish. Despite the obvious flaws in her case, the board voted to uphold the violation. I was ordered to lower the fence by 2 inches within 30 days or face escalating fines. The decision was so clearly biased that even some of my neighbors began to question Karen's leadership. That's when I decided to take a different approach. Instead of fighting Karen's petty violations, I started documenting everything. I installed security cameras around my property, kept detailed logs of all interactions, and began researching the legal limitations of HOA authority. My research revealed some interesting facts about Karen's management style. She had been issuing violation notices without proper board approval, imposing fines that exceeded the amounts specified in the covenants, and making unilateral decisions that required majority votes. More importantly, she had been conducting unauthorized inspections of private property. The breaking point came on a Tuesday morning in early summer. I was working from home when I noticed movement in my backyard through the window. At first, I thought it might be a maintenance worker, but then I saw Karen's distinctive blonde bob and navy pantsuit. She was in my backyard, measuring my fence with a metal ruler and taking photographs. She had somehow gotten through the locked gate and was now documenting what she clearly hoped would be evidence of additional violations. I watched in amazement as she pulled out a notebook and began sketching a diagram of my yard. I quietly activated the recording function on my security system and stepped outside to confront her. "Karen, what are you doing in my backyard?" She looked up with a defiant expression, as if she had every right to be there. "I'm conducting a routine compliance inspection," she announced. "Several residents have complained about potential violations on your property." I explained that she had no right to enter my private property without permission, but Karen dismissed my concerns with a wave of her hand. "As HOA president, I have the authority to inspect any property within Pine Ridge Gardens to ensure compliance with our covenants." That was completely false, and we both knew it. The HOA covenants specifically required 24-hour notice and homeowner consent for any inspections. Karen had neither, but she seemed to believe that her position granted her unlimited authority. "I'm going to have to ask you to leave," I said firmly. "If you want to inspect my property, you need to follow the proper procedures." Karen's face flushed with anger. "Don't you dare tell me what I can and cannot do," she snapped. "I am the HOA president, and I will not be intimidated by residents who think they can flout our community standards." She continued her inspection, now with obvious spite, measuring everything from my fence height to the distance between my outdoor furniture. She took dozens of photographs, including close-ups of minor imperfections that no reasonable person would consider violations. I warned her again that she was trespassing, but Karen had entered what I recognized as her full power trip mode. She began lecturing me about property values, community standards, and the importance of HOA enforcement. Her voice grew louder and more shrill with each sentence. "You people never understand," she declared, gesturing wildly with her ruler. "Without proper oversight, neighborhoods like this would descend into chaos. Property values would plummet, and we'd end up living in some kind of suburban wasteland." I let her continue her rant while the security cameras captured everything. Karen spent nearly 20 minutes in my backyard, documenting imaginary violations and working herself into an increasingly agitated state. She measured my fence multiple times, photographed my garden from every angle, and even checked the alignment of my outdoor furniture. Finally, I decided to end the confrontation. "Karen, you need to leave my property immediately. If you refuse, I'll have to call the police." Her response was pure Karen. "Go ahead and call them," she said with a contemptuous laugh. "I'm sure they'll be very interested to hear about your multiple HOA violations and your attempts to intimidate the president of the Homeowners Association." I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. While waiting for the dispatcher, I calmly explained to Karen that she was trespassing and that her unauthorized inspection had no legal standing. She responded by taking more photographs and making additional notes in her violation notebook. The dispatcher was professional and efficient. I explained that the president of my homeowners association had entered my private property without permission and was refusing to leave. The dispatcher confirmed my address and said that officers would be dispatched immediately. Karen overheard the conversation and finally began to realize that her situation might be more serious than she had anticipated. "You're making a huge mistake," she warned. "The police will side with me once they understand the situation." I doubted that, but I didn't argue. Instead, I continued recording while Karen spent the next few minutes trying to gather as much evidence as possible before the police arrived. She seemed to believe that documenting more violations would somehow justify her trespassing. The police arrived within 10 minutes. 2 officers, a middle-aged man and a younger woman, approached my backyard where Karen was still taking photographs. I met them at the gate and briefly explained the situation. Officer Martinez, the senior officer, listened to my account and then asked to speak with Karen. She immediately launched into a lengthy explanation about HOA authority, community standards, and her responsibilities as president. "Ma'am," Officer Martinez interrupted, "do you have written permission to be on this property?" Karen's confident expression faltered slightly. "I don't need permission," she insisted. "I'm the HOA president, and I have the authority to conduct compliance inspections." Officer Martinez asked to see the HOA covenants that granted her this authority. Karen produced her thick binder and began flipping through pages, searching for the relevant section. After several minutes of increasingly frantic searching, she was unable to find any provision that authorized unauthorized property inspections. "The authority is implied," Karen finally declared. "How else am I supposed to enforce our community standards?" Officer Martinez exchanged a meaningful glance with his partner. "Ma'am, implied authority doesn't give you the right to enter private property without permission. The homeowner has asked you to leave, and you've refused. That constitutes trespassing." Karen's face went pale as the reality of her situation began to sink in. "This is ridiculous," she sputtered. "I was just doing my job. This man has been flagrantly violating our HOA covenants, and someone needs to hold him accountable." Officer Martinez asked to see evidence of these violations. Karen eagerly showed him her photographs and measurements, but as she explained each supposed infraction, it became clear that most of her complaints were either trivial or completely fabricated. "So you're saying this fence is 2 inches too tall?" Officer Martinez asked, looking at Karen's measurements. "Exactly," Karen confirmed. "The covenant clearly states that fences cannot exceed 6 feet in height." Officer Martinez pulled out his own measuring tape and checked the fence height. It measured exactly 6 feet. When he pointed this out to Karen, she insisted that his measurement was wrong and that she had used a more accurate device. The situation grew more embarrassing for Karen as Officer Martinez continued to question her evidence. Her photographs showed normal backyard features that she had somehow interpreted as violations. Her measurements were inconsistent and appeared to have been manipulated to support predetermined conclusions. Meanwhile, I showed Officer Martinez the security footage of Karen's unauthorized entry and her refusal to leave when asked. The video clearly demonstrated that she had entered my property without permission and had ignored multiple requests to leave. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step over here," Officer Martinez said, his tone becoming more serious. Karen's confident demeanor completely crumbled as she realized that the police were not going to support her position. "This is outrageous," she protested. "I'm being treated like a criminal for trying to maintain community standards. When this gets out, everyone will see how residents are terrorizing their HOA leadership." Officer Martinez wasn't interested in Karen's theories about community terrorism. He calmly explained that she was being arrested for trespassing and that she had the right to remain silent. Karen's eyes widened in shock as she realized that her authority as HOA president meant nothing in the face of actual law enforcement. "You can't arrest me," she whispered, as if saying it quietly would make it true. "I'm the president of the Homeowners Association." Officer Martinez produced his handcuffs and gently turned Karen around. "Ma'am, you're under arrest for trespassing. You have the right to remain silent." Karen's face went completely white as the metal cuffs clicked into place around her wrists.